My son told me I was too old, too slow, and simply a burden. So my son and my daughter-in-law, Allison, drove me out for lunch and left me at Maplewood Care, a place that smells of old soup and lost memories with papers I never signed. They moved into my house the next day, filling my kitchen with their laughter and plans as if I'd already vanished. But I wasn't confused. I wasn't finished. He thought I'd fade away quietly, maybe forget my own name by the first frost. But mothers have a way of surviving where nobody thinks to look. What Ethan never understood, and what Allison pretended not to, is that you don't raise a family with soft hands and a weak mind. They saw my medicine bottles, my limp, my shaking hands, and thought I was harmless. They didn't see the part of me that had survived harder things than betrayal. While Allison complimented the staff on how safe I'd be, and Ethan avoided my eyes, I felt every old wound in my body, every scar from nights spent cleaning houses, every ache from missed doctor visits so my son could have new shoes. I remembered scrubbing other people's floors until my knees cracked, skipping meals so Ethan could eat, pawning my wedding ring to buy his first suit. All those sacrifices suddenly erased by 2 signatures and a look that said, "She's not coming home." Maybe Ethan believed the stories Allison whispered in the kitchen. Maybe he forgot that stubbornness is a legacy I gave him. Or maybe he never truly knew the lengths a mother would go to protect her family, even from itself. But what they never saw was this. Sometimes the weakest body hides a spine made of iron. And while they moved into my home, like it was their birthright, I began planning something they'd feel every time the mail arrived, every time little Noah asked why Grandma never called. This is not the story of a woman who faded away quietly. This is the story of how I turned their lesson into a legacy they'll never forget. Would you forgive, or would you make them remember who raised them? Comment below. I had already made my choice the night Allison smiled at my bedside. The cracks didn't split open overnight. They widened quietly, like water freezing in stone, slow but relentless. For years, Allison made herself the caretaker everyone praised. She'd bring over homemade soup fuss about my salt intake and insist on checking my blood pressure after Sunday church. One afternoon, she brought me a new phone saying, "Just in case of emergencies, Margaret." It seemed thoughtful, until I realized every contact but hers and Ethan's had vanished. My best friend's number, my pharmacy, even the neighbor who always checked on me during storms, gone, replaced with Allison's smiling face as my new emergency call. Sometimes little things disappeared, my checkbook, my spare house key, a pair of reading glasses I kept by the window. Allison would find them days later tucked in odd places. "You really should rest more, Mom." She'd say, her voice soft but her eyes sharper than glass. Forgetfulness runs in the family, you know. Once during a rare family movie night, I caught her rewinding the same scene again and again, just enough to confuse me about where the story left off. "You always did lose track of things," she teased almost sweetly. But when I checked the remote later, the batteries were missing. The TV never worked right after that. But it was the morning I found Allison baking in my kitchen, humming a tune I hadn't heard since my husband's funeral, that I realized something had shifted. She set a slice of lemon cake on the table, smiled, and said, "Do you ever wonder if people remember you for what you did, or just for how long you lasted?" Her words lingered long after the cake was gone. Ethan, meanwhile, faded into the background. He'd busy himself fixing a squeaky door or mowing the lawn, leaving Allison to handle the important conversations. If I asked why I couldn't find my prescription refill, Allison would brush a crumb from her blouse and murmur, "Let's not stress Ethan, Mom. He worries enough as it is." I started making notes, jotting down odd questions. Why does Allison always answer my phone? Who signed for my delivery last Thursday? Why is Ethan always tired, but never asks why? On the day they took me to Maplewood, Allison handed me a box of my favorite tea and whispered, No one's meant to be alone forever, Margaret. Sometimes families have to do the hard thing. She patted my hand, then pressed her wedding ring into my palm, cold, unfamiliar, and heavy. "Keep this safe for me," she said. "Some things are better out of sight for a while." I nodded, but the words I wanted to say stuck in my throat like bones. Let them believe I was lost. I was only waiting. Most folks in Willow Creek just know me as Margaret Barnes, retired school secretary, church bake sale queen, and the lady who still plants roses even when her hands won't quite listen. I've lived in this house for nearly 40 years, raised a son, buried a husband, and survived more winters than most of my neighbors combined. People say I'm stubborn as a mule and twice as hard to move. But here's what they never understand. The strongest roots always run silent, and sometimes the smallest woman in the room is the one who can outlast them all. Have you ever been the only one who remembered how everything used to be? Stay with me, I promise you'll see why I never let go. Have you ever sensed something was off but stayed silent to see just how far someone would go? Tell me, would you speak up or let the game play out? Let me show you what happens when a mother finally stops pretending. I used to think betrayal would sound like thunder, a slammed door, a shouted curse. But in real life it arrives quietly with missing mail, new signatures on old forms, and the taste of someone else's control in your morning tea. After a week at Maplewood, my world had shrunk to a single window and the echo of Allison's careful footsteps. She would visit with a box of cookies for the nurses and a list of health updates for the staff, all while avoiding my eyes. "Just sign these, Margaret," she'd say, sliding over fresh paperwork. "Routine insurance, nothing serious." But Allison never did anything without a reason. I noticed her phone always pointed at my pill bottles. My checkbook vanished only to turn up in the trunk of her car days later. When I asked Ethan, he just shrugged. "Allie's helping Mom. Let her do what she does best." Even Ethan changed. When he visited, he'd talk about work, about Noah's school, anything but me. Sometimes after dinner, I caught him staring out the window, chewing his thumbnail like a nervous boy. Once I heard their voices arguing outside my door, Ethan's voice cracking. "She's my mother. This feels wrong." Allison flat. "It's not about feelings, Ethan. It's about safety and about the house." I started keeping notes in the margins of a puzzle book. Names, dates, things that felt off the day a nurse asked about my history of forgetfulness. I realized Allison was rewriting my story one whisper at a time. That's when Monica reappeared, just as the walls felt like they were closing in. The receptionist poked her head in. "You have a visitor, Miss Barnes," says her name is Monica. Monica James' old friend, poker night partner, and after my husband passed, the only lawyer I trusted with my life. We'd drifted apart since Ethan's wedding, but she'd always checked in on holidays or after storms. When Monica walked into Maplewood holding a pie and a folder thick with papers, I felt hope for the first time in weeks. She waited until we were alone, her tone gentle but sharp as ever. "Margaret, did you really authorize this power of attorney? Change your will? Move your accounts?" I shook my head. She slid the paperwork across the blanket. The signatures looked almost like mine almost. Monica's brow furrowed. "Allison's name is everywhere. She's been moving fast. But you're not out of options, not with me here." Suddenly I realized I wasn't fighting alone. I showed Monica my puzzle book full of scribbled clues, missing statements, strange visits, odd questions from staff. She read every page, her eyes narrowing with each new detail. We started quietly checking bank statements, old letters, security footage. Monica coached me on what to say, what to sign, and what never to sign again. Together we watched Allison tighten her grip, and Ethan grow smaller beside her, his loyalty turning brittle. But there was one more layer to the pain. Noah, my grandson, clung to my hand during visits. "Grandma, are you coming home? Mommy says you forget too much." I squeezed his fingers, whispering, "Don't worry, honey. Sometimes you have to let grown-ups play their games until it's your turn to move." Meanwhile, Ethan and Allison's marriage was fraying. Their arguments spilled into my room. her voice all steel, his all sorrow. I saw in Ethan's face the boy I raised unsure, afraid, loving too much to stand up for what's right. One night after they left, I found a note slipped under my pillow. In Allison's neat handwriting. "Let go, Margaret. Some roots aren't worth saving." She thought she'd won. But she didn't know I'd already started to fight back with Monica at my side, and a memory sharper than any signature. The more they tried to erase me, the more I remembered. And the more Monica uncovered, the closer we got to the truth. Have you ever realized the only person you could trust was the one everyone else had forgotten? Would you wait for the perfect moment? Or take back your story one secret at a time? The real battle was just beginning. I never put much faith in perfect justice. Life never gave it to me, so why expect it now? Sometimes all a mother hopes for is to tip the scales back toward the truth, even if she has to do it in silence, and even if it costs her more than anyone will ever know. After Monica's visit, the air at Maplewood shifted like the quiet before a storm. Nurses lingered just a little longer by my door, trading glances whenever Allison arrived with her cold smile and perfectly pressed blouse. Even the administrator started triple-checking paperwork before passing me a pen, as if sensing something was off, but too polite to say it out loud. Allison must have felt the change too. Her visits grew less frequent, shorter, more performative. Instead of the long, watchful afternoon, I'd get brief texts. "Hope you're well." As if a few words could erase the ache she'd left behind. When she did appear, she'd sigh at the staff voice dripping with concern. "Mom's really slipping, isn't she, poor thing?" But the look in her eyes wasn't pity. It was calculation, a quiet warning that the game wasn't over. She started moving my furniture out of the house, telling Ethan it was for renovations. My favorite armchair, the family clock, even the quilt I'd made for my wedding, all boxed up and sent who knows where. Ethan barely questioned it, trusting Allison like he always did. But I saw his mask start to slip. One evening he came alone. He stood at the window for a long time before finally asking, voice barely above a whisper, "Mom, are you happy here?" I waited, letting the silence stretch between us, then answered with the same gentleness I used when he was a boy. "Are you?" He blinked, looking down, his hands shaking just slightly. Before he left, he squeezed my hand almost too tight, as if afraid I'd slip away for good. Meanwhile, Allison was juggling too many secrets, and the cracks were starting to show. My late husband's tools, carefully kept in the garage for decades, vanished overnight. The house was accidentally listed for sale online. The neighbor across the street, always quick with a casserole or a rumor called Monica, to ask why strangers were viewing the property in the middle of the week. Monica and I were quietly gathering evidence, a paper trail Allison never expected. Bank statements, phone logs, security footage, even a second bank account opened in my name, but written in a hand that only almost looked like mine. "It's your signature again," Monica said one day, sliding a copy across the table. "But not your handwriting. Allison's getting sloppy." But Allison wasn't just making mistakes. She was getting reckless. Maybe she thought she was untouchable. Or maybe she was growing desperate, feeling the walls closing in, not realizing it was her own web that was tightening. One Sunday, as sunlight streaked through the Maplewood windows, Noah burst in during visiting hours, all elbows and hope. He slipped a folded note into my hand. "It's from Dad," he whispered. "He says he's sorry." It was a letter. "Mom, I don't know what's right anymore. Allison says you wanted all this, but I keep remembering you teaching me how to tell the truth even when it hurt. I miss you. Ethan." That letter ached like a muscle waking up after too long a sleep. Allison hadn't won. Not yet. Not as long as my son remembered who I was and who he was meant to be. Monica and I worked quietly every day, adding a new stitch to the fabric of our case. She gave me a phone Allison didn't know about. She whispered, "It's all about timing, Margaret. Let her feel safe. Let her think you're fading." And so I faded. On the outside, I acted just confused enough. I watched, listened, waited. Inside, I was wide awake, because it's one thing to lose your house, but it's another thing to let someone else write your story. In those weeks, I kept a notebook hidden under my pillow, writing down every strange call, every missing item, every slip in Allison's voice. I noticed patterns, times she seemed to linger by the nurse's station. Questions she asked about my medication, old stories. She brought up about her own mother. She forgot things, too. Maybe it's just what happens to women in our family. Was that a warning or a confession? The web of secrets was growing hers, mine Monica's. And still there were things I didn't know. I caught Monica staring at Allison during one visit, a look I'd never seen before. Later, Monica admitted, "There's something about her, Margaret. She's not just after your house. There's an old hurt here, one I think goes deeper than even Ethan knows." She hesitated, then added, "Be careful. She's not done yet." The day of reckoning drew closer. Monica moved like a chess master, never rushing a move, always thinking 3 steps ahead. We filed paperwork with the county contesting the forged power of attorney, freezing my accounts, putting a legal hold on the house. Every step left a trail Allison never expected, but Allison doubled down. She hosted an open house at my home, strangers wandering my kitchen, her voice sugar-sweet. Margaret always loved to bake, but it's time for new beginnings. She took family photos off the walls, packed them into boxes, and handed them to Ethan with a forced smile. "You don't need these, honey. They're just memories." Ethan looked gray-torn between 2 lives. He called me late at night, his voice shaky. "Mom, I'm sorry. Allison says you want this, but nothing feels right. I keep dreaming you're sitting at the kitchen table waiting for me." Noah felt the tension, too. He got in a fight at school after another boy said, "Your grandma's crazy." The teacher called Allison, but it was Ethan who picked Noah up. On the way home, Noah asked, "Is Grandma really lost, or did we lose her?" Monica soon found the critical detail. The will, Allison submitted to probate, is missing 2 witnesses. That's enough to contest the whole thing. "Margaret, we have grounds to reclaim everything if you're ready for the fight." I nodded. I was ready. But I was also afraid. Afraid not of losing, but of what would come after. I could sense Allison's desperation growing, and I knew there was one card left she hadn't played. The hearing was set quietly, just a date circled on Monica's calendar. Allison didn't see it coming. The first she knew was a letter from Monica's office. She stormed into Maplewood, cheeks flushed fury, barely masked. "You're making a mistake, Margaret. You don't know what you're doing." I met her gaze unblinking. "Don't I?" "You forgot I was watching." She threatened, pleaded, even tried to play the forgiveness card. But Monica was unshakable. For every excuse she had a document. For every fake signature a witness. Allison left in a huff, but Ethan lingered, pain raw and visible. That night, Ethan returned alone. He stood in my doorway, voice trembling. "I let her talk me into all this, Mom. I thought I was protecting you. But maybe I just didn't want to stand up alone." He broke down, sobbing like a boy. I hugged him, knowing forgiveness and justice aren't always the same thing. But the final card hadn't been played. There was still one more truth, one only Allison and I knew, a secret, twisted with the past, the kind that can either break a family forever or set it free. The day of reckoning was coming. And this time I wouldn't be erased. The day of reckoning didn't arrive with thunder. It slipped in quietly, carried on the soles of Monica's shoes as we entered the courthouse. A place that felt too small for the history, weighing on every word, every glance. The hearing was private, almost understated. Allison sat stiff in her charcoal suit lips, pressed tight eyes darting from Monica to the judge. She'd brought her own lawyer, a man with the smooth voice and blank stare of someone paid to believe in nothing but the check he'd cash at the end. Ethan sat behind me, hands twisting in his lap, while Monica arranged our stack of evidence, with the calm of a surgeon prepping for a delicate operation. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hum with anticipation. Monica started simply, methodically. She laid out every forged signature, every transfer, every coincidence that was anything but. Your Honor, the power of attorney was not witnessed in accordance with state law. The signature on this second bank account does not match my client's handwriting, but does match the known writing of the defendant Allison. Each page landed like a stone in a pond, ripples of shock and denial shifting across Allison's face. But Allison, never one to back down, found her voice. She played the part. I only ever wanted to protect Margaret. She's been confused for years. I handled everything because no one else would. If I made mistakes, it was out of love. Monica didn't flinch. Doing what's best or doing what's easiest? She asked softly. The question hung in the air, and for the first time, Allison's confidence flickered. Then came the twist nobody saw coming. Monica produced an email dated just days before Margaret was sent to Maplewood. It was from Allison to a local realtor, discussing a fast sale and offering a bonus if the transaction could be hidden from public record. The judge's eyebrows shot up. Allison's lawyer blanched. Ethan gasped, finally understanding in real time the depth of the betrayal. And then, as if the room couldn't hold any more tension, Allison broke. She stood her chair scraping against the linoleum, voice shaking. You all see me as a villain. But none of you know what it's like to be invisible in your own life. I did what I had to, so I wouldn't disappear. Her words cracked something open, not just in Ethan, but in me too. For a split second, I saw the scared girl behind the schemes. But justice doesn't pause for pain. The judge ruled swiftly. The will is invalid. The power of attorney is revoked. All accounts and properties are restored to Margaret Barnes. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like aftermath, quiet cold. The room full of debris you can't sweep away. Allison left without another word, her shadow stretching down the empty hall. Ethan slumped beside me as if the verdict cost him the last of his strength. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered, tears silent on his cheeks. I let her take everything. I let her turn me against you. I squeezed his hand, unsure if I was comforting him or myself. We all get lost, Ethan. But sometimes losing everything is how you see what truly matters. That evening, Monica joined me for coffee in the garden outside Maplewood, a place I'd come to think of as both exile and refuge. You didn't just fight for a house, Margaret, she said, her tone soft but fierce. You fought for your story, your legacy. Most people never get that chance. As dusk fell, a nurse brought Noah for a visit. He ran to me, arms full of wildflowers, cheeks smudged with dirt and innocence. Grandma, are you coming home now? I hugged him tight, breathing in hope and pain, life cycling forward. Soon, baby. And this time we'll make it a home together. But as night settled over town, I felt an unease, a knot that wouldn't untangle. Allison's shadow had vanished from court, but something of her lingered unseen. A secret, a story unfinished, the echo of a choice made long ago. The true climax was never the verdict, but what it exposed: the cost of secrets, the limits of forgiveness, the question of whether breaking the cycle meant letting go or facing the past head on. Later that week, as I packed to leave Maplewood for good, a nurse slipped me an envelope left at the front desk unsigned. Inside was an old photo, Allison. As a young woman standing alone in a doorway, her eyes bright with hope and dread. On the back, in careful handwriting, a message. Some burdens are chosen, some are inherited. Maybe I'll find the difference someday, eh? For the first time I wondered, was Allison the villain? Or another casualty of wounds passed down, woman to woman, mother to daughter, wife to wife? You can win a battle in court, but the war for peace, the healing of what's broken, takes longer. Sometimes all you can do is tell the truth, hope it's enough, and keep living one brave choice at a time. They say a courtroom verdict brings closure, but anyone who's ever survived a real family war knows justice is just the first crack in the shell. The rest, the aching, the reckoning, The rebuilding takes so much longer. I moved out of Maplewood on a morning painted with sunlight and possibility. Ethan carried boxes. Noah danced circles with a toy airplane. Monica managed details and hugs. Our house. My house again looked almost unfamiliar, like a story I'd read in childhood, and only now was living for real. But the shadows weren't gone. Every empty corner hummed with things unsaid. Allison's perfume on a borrowed scarf, an empty space on the bookshelf, where she had once placed her wedding photo, the ghost of a door left open at midnight. For days I found myself listening for her voice, resentful, yes, but also wishing somehow that we might have ended differently. One evening, after the laughter faded and the house stilled, I opened the envelope Allison had left. That old photograph of her so young, so lost, stared up at me like an unanswered question. On the back her words echoed. Some burdens are chosen. Some are inherited. I sat in the kitchen, bathed in the golden hush of dusk, remembering my late husband's last request. Protect Ethan from anyone who'd use love as a weapon. Had I kept my promise, or simply handed the weapon to another woman broken by her own wounds? That night I dreamed I was back in the garden with Allison. Not enemies, not even rivals, but just two women weathered by time, each holding a story that could not be told to anyone else. She looked at me and whispered, "Forgive me, Margaret." Not for what I did, but for what I couldn't become. I woke in tears, a strange ache in my chest. Not just for what was lost, but for what was never given a chance to be healed. In the weeks that followed, healing was not a straight line. Some days, forgiveness felt like a mountain I had no strength to climb. Other days, Noah's laughter or Ethan's careful kindness made it seem possible. I created a small scholarship fund in my husband's name to help women starting over women like Allison, like me, who learned too late that survival and wholeness are not the same. I planted roses in the backyard again, red and wild roots, tangled deep with memories. Some mornings I'd kneel in the dirt, remembering every meal skipped, every fight endured, every small betrayal that led us here. Not to dwell, but to remind myself, you survive the worst. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you get to choose what grows in its place. Ethan came over every Sunday, each visit more honest than the last. We spoke in truths and half-truths, apologies, threaded through the laughter building, something new from the ashes. One afternoon he said, "You were never a burden, Mom. You were the reason I learned how to fight." And I finally believed him. Sometimes at twilight I thought of Allison not with anger, but with a strange, aching empathy. I wondered where she'd gone, what ghosts she still carried, and if she ever found the difference between being forgotten and being set free. You see, this was never just a story about betrayal or revenge. It was about the invisible battles women fight, the silent wars over home dignity legacy, and the stubborn hope that even the deepest wounds might heal. So if you've ever been called a burden or felt erased by someone else's story, know this: you are not what they made you carry. You are the author, the survivor, the quiet strength that refuses to fade. And if you're ready for another true story of family forgiveness and quiet power, stay with us. Your journey isn't over yet, because the next chapter always waits just beyond what you thought was the end. If this story touched you, share your own moment of survival or forgiveness in the comments. Have you ever had to fight for your place, your name, your truth? Your story matters here. And if you want more real mom Reddit stories about healing after family betrayal, don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the bell. There's always another truth to be told, and maybe the next one will be yours. Sometimes the truest revenge isn't justice. It's living, loving, and choosing your own ending after the storm. The rest is legacy.